Okay, let's just jump right in. The Inferno Thanks You. I know, it's a pretty intense title, right? But stick with me, because it's not just for shock value. We're going to unpack a really powerful idea here. This concept that maybe, just maybe, our inaction, the stuff we don't do, can have some seriously massive consequences.
So this idea actually gets a lot of its inspiration from the great poet Dante Alighieri. And for him, it wasn't just about, the big, obvious evil things people do. He was really focused on the passive sins, the things we just fail to do. His whole argument was that our negligence, our complacency, well, it's like fuel for the fire. It actually strengthens the very chaos we say we're against.
And at the core of all this is a big philosophical concept. It's called privatio boni. Now that sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It says that evil isn't this big, powerful force all on its own. Nope. Instead, it's just an absence of good. It's a vacuum. Think of it like this. Darkness isn't a thing. It's just what happens when you turn off the light. And that's the key takeaway here, right? Failing to do good can be just as destructive as actively doing something bad.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this actually look in the real world? Well, one of the biggest hurdles is something we could call a credibility gap. And there's this incredible modern parable inspired by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard that just hits the nail on the head. We're going to call it the parable of the clowns.
So, picture this. You've got a quiet little village, and right nearby, a traveling circus has just set up its big top. Then, one afternoon, a fire sparks to life in the dry fields, right between the circus and the village.
A couple of the clowns, they spot the danger immediately. And they don't waste a second. They don't even stop to change out of their costumes. They're in full makeup, big shoes, the whole shebang. And they are just sprinting towards the village to sound the alarm about the fire.
But here's where it all goes wrong. The villagers look up and what do they see? They see two clowns running and screaming and waving their arms. They don't hear a warning. They see a show. They start laughing. They're cheering. They think it's just a clever stunt to get them to come to the circus. And the wilder the clowns get, the more desperate they are, the harder the villagers laugh.
So the message, a true life or death warning, is totally lost, all because of how the messengers looked. And because nobody listened, the village burns to the ground. Everything is lost.
And that just leaves you with this haunting question, doesn't it? When a vital truth completely fails to land, where's the problem? Is it the message, or is it the messengers? It's a powerful reminder that if our actions don't line up with our words, we risk looking like those clowns, and our most urgent warnings just become a joke.
So let's zoom out from that parable. How does this whole credibility gap idea look on a global scale? Well, if you look at it from the perspective of Christian outreach strategists, they see huge parts of the world where their message, for whatever reason, just hasn't been heard. And for them, this represents a massive, urgent, unfinished task.
They actually have a name for this region. They call it the 1040 window. And it's pretty literal. It's named for the lines of latitude that box it in on a map. We're talking about a huge swath of the globe here. North Africa, the Middle East, a big chunk of Asia. From their point of view, this is the area with the most significant need.
And the scale? I mean, it's just staggering. It's hard to even wrap your head around it. We're talking about 69 different countries and, get this, 5.3 billion people living inside this window. To put that in perspective for you, that is almost 2/3 of every single person on the planet.
And it gets even more specific. Of those 5.3 billion people, the data they use suggests that a full 90% are considered unreached. Now, what that means is that they've had very little or maybe even zero exposure to the Christian message. When you see it like this, it's a visual of a massive communication breakdown.
So you see a number like that, and it begs a pretty tough question, right? If the task is that huge, what's the holdup? And this is where the source material we're looking at kind of turns the camera around and points it right back at the priorities and, frankly, the spending habits of what's often called the Christian West.
Let's just look at the raw numbers for a second. According to estimates from places like the UN, to solve some of the world's biggest problems, I'm talking basic healthcare for everyone, clean water and sanitation, ending hunger, wiping out extreme poverty, it would cost about $723 billion a year. Now, that sounds like a crazy amount of money, right? An impossible number. But is it?
Well, hold that number in your head for a second, and now compare it to this.
In the West, the amount spent every year on vices, things like illegal drugs, gambling, money just vanishing into corruption, that number is over $1 trillion. A trillion. The money to solve the world's biggest problems is literally there. It's just going somewhere else. This is what the cost of complacency looks like in black and white.
Okay, so if the problem is a lack of action, and that's being fueled by some seriously misplaced priorities, then what's the answer? Where do we go from here? The material we're drawing from offers up a couple of really powerful metaphors that completely reframe the solution, and they suggest the answer might be way closer than any of us think.
First up, think about two bodies of water, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. Now, they're both fed by the exact same river, the Jordan. But the Sea of Galilee is bursting with fish, with life, because it takes that water in and then it flows back out. It gives it away. The Dead Sea, on the other hand, only takes in. It has no outlet. It just hoards the water. And what happens? It becomes so salty and stagnant that nothing can live in it. The message there is pretty clear, isn't it? To be a source of life, you have to give. You can't just take.
And that leads us to one last story. It's about a knight who spends his entire life on a quest for the Holy Grail. He travels the whole world, searching everywhere. He comes home at the end of his life, old, tired, and feeling like a total failure. But then, right there at his own front gate, a leper is begging for just a sup of water. The knight, feeling this deep sense of pity, gives the man a drink from his own dented, broken cup. And in that one simple act of kindness, the cup transforms in his hands. It becomes the Holy Grail he'd been looking for all along. See, he was scouring the globe for some legendary, magical object, when the real quest, the real mission, was a simple act of service right on his own doorstep. And that's really the final point here, isn't it? Maybe the great, world-changing missions don't start in some far-off place. Maybe they start with the needs that are right in front of us, the things we can do right here, right now. So the real question it leaves us with is, what Holy Grail is sitting right in front of you?